Good evening. Tonight we turn our attention to a nation at a crossroads, a country whose story is being rewritten in real time, not just in the headlines, but in the lives of millions. Let's talk about Britain, the land that gave the world Shakespeare's poetry, the Beatles, music, and, in recent years, a national experiment in self-sabotage that has left many wondering what happened to the country they thought they knew. Today's headlines scream with urgency. UK economy stagnates, food prices soar, supply chains choke. The news is relentless, and the sense of crisis is impossible to ignore. The year is 2025, and the promised sunlit uplands of Brexit look more like a foggy field with a broken fence, an image that perfectly captures the uncertainty and disappointment that now hangs over the nation. The air isn't filled with triumph, but with a collective groan, the sound of a nation realizing things just aren't working as they used to. Everyday life feels heavier, and hope is in short supply. The bold declarations of 2016 have aged poorly. The swagger is gone, replaced by a national shrug. The slogans that once promised a brighter future now echo with irony. People are looking at their grocery bills and asking, was this really a good idea? Every trip to the supermarket is a reminder of promises unfulfilled and dreams deferred. The crisis isn't a dramatic collapse, but a slow grinding decline, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Shops close quietly, jobs disappear, and the sense of community erodes bit by bit. Britain didn't just leave the EU, it left behind a sense of optimism and competence, now replaced by a growing case of leavers' regret. The question on everyone's mind, can the country find its way back, or is this the new normal? Public opinion is a funny thing. In 2016, 52% voted to leave the EU, a political earthquake. Fast forward to today, and polls show nearly 60% would now vote to rejoin. What changed? Reality. Abstract arguments about sovereignty have been replaced by the concrete pain of higher prices and fewer opportunities. The confident Brexiteer is now a rare sight, their arguments met with skepticism. The national conversation has shifted from, how great will Brexit be, to, how do we fix this mess? The biggest shift is among older voters and former Leave supporters, quietly admitting it wasn't the panacea they were promised. This isn't about defeat, it's about facing a painful truth. The Brexit experiment has run its course and many are now asking, can we put the chemicals back in the bottles? Let's rewind to 2016, a year that would change the course of British history. The air was thick with anticipation, and millions across the UK lined up at polling stations, ready to cast their votes in a referendum that promised to reshape the nation's future. At the heart of the campaign was the now infamous Red Brexit bus, rolling through towns and cities, emblazoned with a message that would become legendary. We send the EU $350 million a week. Let's fund our NHS instead. It was a claim repeated endlessly, simple enough to stick in everyone's mind, and powerful enough to sway opinions. But behind the boldness was a different reality. The slogan was catchy, but it was also misleading, an exaggeration that played on hopes and fears. The Leave campaign painted a picture of a Britain unshackled, easy trade deals, economic freedom, and a bonfire of red tape. Politicians promised a brighter, more prosperous future, where the country would finally take back control. But the reality that followed was far less magical. Instead of less bureaucracy, businesses faced mountains of new paperwork. Instead of more money for public services, budgets were squeezed even tighter. The trade deals that were supposed to be quick and easy barely replaced what was lost, leaving many industries struggling to adapt. The promised windfall for the NHS never materialized. Instead, the health service faced new challenges, with staff shortages and tighter budgets, while the economic fallout meant there was less to go around for everyone. Negotiating as a medium-sized island nation against economic giants like the EU turned out to be, unsurprisingly, a daunting task. The process was slow, complicated, and often frustrating, with British officials struggling to secure the deals they had hoped for. The Brexit project was sold as a fairy tale, complete with heroes, villains, and the promise of a happy ending. The nation was swept up in a story of reclaiming sovereignty and national pride. But now, years later, we find ourselves living in the epilogue. The dragon may be slain, but the village is left in ruins, shops closed, communities struggling, and the promised prosperity nowhere to be found. The grand promises of 2016 now echo as bitter reminders of a dream that soured. For many, the hope and excitement have faded, replaced by disappointment and regret. The hangover just won't go away. The nation is left to pick up the pieces, wondering if the fairy tale ending was ever possible, or just another fantastical beast. Let's talk about the economy, the thing Britain deliberately made worse. Economists warned Brexit would hurt. They were dismissed as Project Fear. Turns out, it was just a spoiler alert. UK growth has lagged behind every G7 nation. Jobs haven't vanished, but wages and opportunities have stagnated. Fishing and finance, once promised a golden future, are tangled in red tape or have moved abroad. Immigration. Net migration is at record highs, but with more bureaucracy and fewer benefits. The NHS, once promised a cash injection, is bleeding staff and resources. The economic story of Brexit is not liberation, but limitation. Britain is smaller, less productive, and more isolated than it needed to be. Remember the simple joy of supermarket shopping? Now it's an adventure in scarcity. Gaps on shelves are common, thanks to clogged supply chains and endless paperwork. Imported food is pricier, cheese, tomatoes, peppers, all up by 20–30%. The Brexit dividend, inflation. Travel is harder too. British citizens now queue in the non-EU line, face new restrictions, and feel like outsiders in Europe. Businesses that relied on EU imports are closing, unable to cope with the costs and complexity. The high street is less vibrant, less diverse. The promise was a dynamic Britain. The reality is a country that feels smaller, poorer, and more cut off. Everyday life is a daily reminder of the price of leaving. The continent that was once on our doorstep now feels a little further away. Let's zoom in. At the port of Dover, trucks idle for hours over minor paperwork errors. Fresh produce arrives late and pricier. Small businesses, like Sarah's engineering firm, lose European clients and lay off staff, unable to navigate new trade barriers. Students miss out on Erasmus, replaced by a limited alternative, losing the freedom to study across Europe. Family dinners are tense. One generation talks sovereignty, the other lost opportunities and rising costs. These aren't grand debates in Parliament, but daily frustrations and lost chances. The Brexit story is told in quiet disappointments, strained relationships, and dreams deferred. The frictionless trade and open opportunities are gone, replaced by red tape and regret. The new normal is a country struggling to adapt to self-imposed obstacles. The cost isn't just economic, it's personal. This is Brexit, lived. Brexit was supposed to bring stability, but Downing Street has been a revolving door. Prime ministers come and go, each with a new plan, none able to solve the Brexit puzzle. The impossible trilemma, no hard Irish border, leaving the single market, independent trade policy, remains unsolved. Political energy is consumed by Brexit, while urgent issues like the NHS and housing are neglected. Businesses crave certainty but get chaos instead. Faith in politicians has collapsed. Both leavers and remainers feel betrayed. The grand promise of taking back control has left a government lurching from crisis to crisis. Britain is weaker, more divided, and desperate for grown-up leadership. For years, talking about rejoining the EU was taboo. Now, it's mainstream. The grinding impacts of Brexit have made rejoin a rallying cry, especially among the young. Marches, polls, and social media show a clear majority favoring a return. Even pro-Brexit newspapers and pundits are questioning if it was all a mistake. The Overton window is shifting, the debate is back. Young people, who lost the right to live, work, and study across Europe, are leading the charge. Political parties, especially Labour, are under pressure as public opinion shifts. The question is no longer if a major party will back rejoining, but when. The quiet regret has become a demand for change. The conversation about Britain's future in Europe is back on the table. Suppose Britain wants back in. It's not as simple as knocking on the EU's door. The EU has changed and the terms for re-entry are tougher. No more special treatment. Britain would have to join the euro, a huge symbolic and economic shift. Schengen membership would mean giving up border controls, the very thing Brexit promised to restore. Britain would be a rule taker, not a rule maker, accepting all EU laws without influence. No cherry picking, no rebates, no opt-outs. The price of re-entry is high, less sovereignty, less privilege, and a long, difficult negotiation. The irony? To undo Brexit, Britain would have to accept more integration than ever before. The club's rules have changed, and Britain's old seat is gone. Rejoining would mean swallowing a lot of pride, and a lot of EU rules. Here we are, late 2025. Britain in limbo, caught between a past it can't return to and a future it can't agree on. The mood across the country is one of uncertainty, with people from all walks of life wondering what comes next. The choices made in recent years have left deep marks, and the sense of waiting for direction is almost palpable. The Brexit project, far from settling the debate, has only made the Europe question more toxic and central to British politics. Instead of clarity, it's brought division and a sense that the country is still searching for its place in the world. The country faces three paths, each with its own risks and rewards. One option is to double down on Brexit, pushing forward, and hoping that time and determination will eventually bring the promised benefits. Another is to seek a closer relationship with the EU, similar to Norway's model, accepting many of the rules, but without having a real say in making them. This would mean compromise, but perhaps more stability. The third path is to campaign to rejoin the EU, a move that would require facing tough new terms and reopening old wounds. It would be a long, divisive battle, and there's no guarantee of success or unity. All of these options demand honesty about the trade-offs involved, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about the nation's strengths and weaknesses. There are no shortcuts or easy answers. What Britain needs most right now is a grown-up conversation, one that's free from comforting fantasies and nostalgia for a world that no longer exists. It's time to talk openly about what's possible and what's not. The Brexit hangover is real, and the sense of exhaustion is everywhere. But hangovers, as we know, do eventually fade, leaving room for new beginnings. The hope is that, with clear eyes and honest debate, Britain can finally decide what kind of future it truly wants. The next generation is watching, and they deserve a country that chooses its path with care and courage. It's time to choose, not based on dreams or old promises, but on reality, facts, and a shared vision for the years ahead. Good luck, Britain. You're going to need it. The world is watching, and the next chapter is yours to write.